The chat was going wild, but all I could hear was my own ragged breathing and the creak of floorboards outside my room. This wasn't part of the game. This was real. It was supposed to be just another late-night stream. I'd done dozens of them before, entertaining my modest but dedicated audience with horror games and commentary until the wee hours of the morning. Tonight's game was a new indie release, a psychological horror title that had been gaining buzz in the community for its innovative scare tactics and immersive atmosphere. I settled into my chair, adjusting my headset and making sure the lighting was just right. The soft glow of my monitors illuminated the room, casting long shadows in the corners. Outside, the world was silent. At 3 a.m., it felt like I was the only person awake for miles. "Hey everyone, welcome to tonight's stream," I said, forcing enthusiasm into my voice despite the fatigue creeping at the edges of my consciousness. "We're diving into Whispers in the Dark tonight. I've heard it's pretty intense, so let's see if it lives up to the hype." The game loaded, its ominous title screen filling my primary monitor. I could see my own face in the smaller streaming window, pale and slightly washed out in the glow of the screens. The chat scrolled by with greetings and excitement from my regulars. For the first hour, everything was normal. The game was genuinely creepy, with a tense atmosphere and a few well-executed jump scares that had me yelping in surprise, much to the chat's amusement. I fell into my usual rhythm, alternating between focused gameplay and interaction with the viewers. It was during a quieter moment in the game, as I was carefully exploring an abandoned house, that I first heard it. A soft thud, like something being set down, coming from somewhere else in my actual house. I paused, cocking my head to listen. My heart rate, already elevated from the game's tension, kicked up a notch. I lived alone, and at this hour, there shouldn't be any noise except maybe the occasional settling of the house or the hum of appliances. "Did you guys hear that?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. The chat exploded with questions and speculation. Some thought it was part of the game, others suggested it might be my cat. I don't have a cat. I shook my head, trying to dismiss the unease creeping up my spine. "Probably just the house settling," I said, more to convince myself than my viewers. "This game has me on edge. Let's keep going." I turned back to the game, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. My eyes kept darting to the darkness beyond my room's open door. The house felt different somehow, as if the familiar spaces had become alien and threatening. 10 minutes later, it happened again. This time, it was unmistakable. The sound of footsteps, slow and deliberate, coming from the hallway outside my room. I froze, my hands hovering over the keyboard. "Okay, that's not the game," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I definitely heard footsteps. The chat was a blur of activity now, with some viewers expressing concern while others still thought it was an elaborate prank or part of the stream. I wish they were right. I muted my mic and listened intently, straining to hear any further sounds. For a long moment there was nothing but silence. Then, a floorboard creaked, closer this time. My breath caught in my throat. This was no prank, no overactive imagination fueled by too many horror games. Someone was in my house. With shaking hands, I unmuted the mic. "Guys, I think there's someone here," I whispered, trying to keep the panic out of my voice. "I'm going to investigate. Stay with me, okay?" The chat erupted with warnings and pleas to call the police. In hindsight, that would have been the smart move, but in the moment, driven by a mix of adrenaline and misplaced courage, I decided to check it out myself. I stood up slowly, my legs unsteady beneath me. The room suddenly felt too small, too exposed. I glanced at my phone on the desk, considering calling for help, but something held me back. What if I was overreacting? What if it really was just my imagination? Step by step, I approached the door, my heart pounding so loudly I was sure it would give me away. The hallway beyond was a pit of blackness, the familiar contours of my home transformed into a maze of potential hiding spots for intruders. I reached for the light switch, my hand trembling. Click. Nothing happened. The darkness remained impenetrable. A chill ran down my spine. The power was out, but only in the hallway. How was that possible? I turned back to my streaming setup, the monitors now feeling like a beacon in the darkness. "The lights aren't working," I whispered to my viewers. "I'm going to use my phone as a flashlight." Grabbing my phone, I activated the flashlight and turned back to the hallway. The beam cut through the darkness, illuminating a narrow path ahead. I took a deep breath and stepped out of my room. The floorboards creaked beneath my feet, each sound impossibly loud in the silent house. I swept the light back and forth, searching for any sign of an intruder. The familiar photos on the walls, the small table with its bowl of keys, all looked sinister in the harsh light of my phone. I made my way down the hallway, checking each room as I passed. My hands were shaking so badly that the light beam danced erratically across the walls. Every shadow seemed to move, every dark corner concealed a potential threat. As I approached the stairs leading to the ground floor, I heard it again. Footsteps, heavy and deliberate, coming from below. And something else, a low, guttural sound that might have been breathing or growling. I froze, my body rigid with fear. This was the moment in every horror movie where the protagonist makes the fateful decision to investigate further, to descend into danger instead of running to safety. I knew I should turn back, barricade myself in my room, and call the police. But I didn't. Some irrational part of my brain insisted that I needed to know, needed to see what was down there. And so, against every instinct screaming at me to flee, I began to descend the stairs. Each step felt like an eternity. The wood groaned beneath my weight, announcing my presence to whatever waited below. The darkness at the bottom of the stairs was absolute, swallowing the beam of my flashlight. As I reached the midpoint of the staircase, a floorboard creaked loudly beneath my foot. The sound echoed through the house like a gunshot. The footsteps below stopped abruptly. I held my breath, straining to hear any movement. For several heartbeats, there was nothing but silence. Then suddenly, a cacophony of noise erupted from below. Rapid footsteps, a crash of something heavy falling, and that same guttural sound, louder now, unmistakably inhuman. Terror seized me. I turned and bolted back up the stairs, taking them two at a time. Behind me, I could hear something charging up the steps, moving inhumanly fast. I sprinted down the hallway, my phone's light bouncing wildly, casting frantic shadows. I reached my room and slammed the door shut, fumbling with the lock. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely manage it. Finally, the lock clicked into place. I staggered back from the door, gasping for breath, my mind reeling from what I'd just experienced. For a moment, there was silence. Then, a tremendous impact shook the door in its frame. Another followed, and another. Whatever was out there was trying to break in. I scrambled to my desk, my eyes darting to the stream. The chat was a blur of panic and confusion. They had heard everything. "Call the police!" I shouted into my mic, my voice cracking with fear. "Someone, please call the—" The lights in my room flickered and died. My monitors went dark. In an instant, I was plunged into total darkness. The pounding on the door stopped. I stood there, paralyzed, straining to hear anything over the sound of my own panicked breathing. My phone's flashlight was still on, lying on the desk where I dropped it, casting strange shadows across the room. Seconds stretched into minutes. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the occasional creak of the house settling. Had it left? Was I safe? Slowly, cautiously, I reached for my phone. As my hand closed around it, a notification broke the silence. A text message. With trembling fingers, I unlocked the phone. The message was from an unknown number. "Thanks for letting us watch. The show's over now." As the words sank in, I heard a soft click. The door, still intact despite the earlier onslaught, slowly began to open. I raised the phone, its light illuminating the widening gap. In the doorway stood a figure, tall and misshapen, its features lost in shadow, and behind it more shapes moved in the darkness, pressing forward. The last thing I saw before the light went out was a hand, inhuman and grotesque, reaching for me. In the days that followed, my disappearance would become the subject of intense speculation online. Theories ranged from an elaborate hoax to a genuine supernatural encounter. The video of my final stream, cut short in those terrifying last moments, would be analyzed and debated endlessly. But the truth, the horror that entered my home that night and the fate that befell me would remain a mystery, lost in the dark corners of the internet and the shadows of that lonely house. The world beyond my headset had fallen silent, but the screams inside the virtual hellscape wouldn't stop. I clawed at the device, my fingers scrambling for a release that wasn't there. This was supposed to be a game. How did it become my prison? It all started with an email from NextGen VR, a cutting-edge tech company known for pushing the boundaries of virtual reality. They were looking for experienced gamers to beta test their latest creation, a hyper-realistic VR headset that promised to revolutionize the industry. As a lifelong gamer and tech enthusiast, I jumped at the chance. The day the package arrived, I could barely contain my excitement. I tore open the box, revealing a sleek, matte black headset that looked like something out of a sci-fi movie. It was lighter than I expected, with no visible cables or external sensors. A simple note accompanied it. "Welcome to the future of gaming. Enjoy your journey." I spent the next hour setting up the device, following the detailed instructions provided. The process was surprisingly simple. No complex calibrations or room mapping required. Just put on the headset and go. With trembling hands, I slipped the device over my eyes. For a moment, there was nothing but darkness. Then, a burst of light and color flooded my vision. The startup screen materialized before me, so crisp and vibrant it took my breath away. It felt like I was floating in a sea of pure information. A menu appeared, offering a selection of game demos. I chose a fantasy RPG, eager to test the headset's capabilities in a rich, detailed world. As the game loaded, I marveled at the absence of any loading screens or stuttering. One moment I was in the menu, the next I stood in a lush forest clearing. The level of detail was astounding. I could see individual leaves swaying in the breeze, feel the warmth of sunlight on my skin, and smell the earthy scent of the forest floor. When I reached out to touch a nearby tree, the bark felt rough and real under my fingertips. This wasn't just virtual reality. It was indistinguishable from actual reality. I spent the next few hours lost in wonder, exploring the game world and testing the limits of the technology. Every interaction felt natural and intuitive. When I grew tired, I decided it was time to log out and share my experiences online. That's when I discovered the first problem. There was no obvious way to exit the game. I called up the menu, searching for a logout option, but found nothing. Figuring it must be a simple oversight in the beta, I decided to just remove the headset manually. My hands rose to my face, ready to lift the device from my head. But they met nothing but air. I felt my face, my hair, my neck. The headset was gone. Panic began to rise in my chest as I realized I couldn't feel the weight of the device at all. It was as if it had melded with my body, becoming an invisible, intangible part of me. "Okay, stay calm," I said aloud, my voice shaking slightly. "There has to be a way out. Maybe there's a voice command or a gesture I'm missing." I spent the next hour trying every combination of words and movements I could think of, growing increasingly desperate with each failed attempt. The game world remained stubbornly real around me, unyielding to my efforts to break free. As my frustration peaked, the scenery suddenly shifted. The peaceful forest dissolved, replaced by a dark, forbidding landscape. The ground beneath my feet became cracked and barren, and the sky turned a sickly green. In the distance, I could see twisted structures that defied physics, their geometries hurting my eyes if I looked at them too long. A chill ran down my spine as I realized what had happened. Somehow, my panicked attempts to log out had triggered a glitch, throwing me into some kind of corrupted game state. This nightmarish world was never meant to be seen by players. I started walking, hoping to find some kind of boundary or exit point. The terrain was treacherous, with hidden pitfalls and sharp rocks that felt all too real under my feet. Strange creatures skittered at the edge of my vision, always disappearing when I turned to look directly at them. Hours passed, or maybe days. It was impossible to tell time in this place. Fatigue wore at me, but I couldn't stop moving. Every instinct screamed that to rest in this hostile environment would mean death. But how could I die in a virtual world? And if I did, Would I wake up in reality or be trapped here forever? As I trudged up a steep hill, a structure came into view that made my heart leap. It was a door, standing alone in the wasteland, not connected to any building. It looked out of place in this twisted world, too normal, too inviting. I approached cautiously, half expecting it to vanish like a mirage, but it remained solid and real. As I got closer, I could make out words etched into its surface. Emergency exit. Relief flooded through me. This had to be it, the way out of this nightmare. I reached for the handle, my hand trembling with anticipation and fear. The moment my fingers touched the cool metal, a jolt of electricity shot through my body. I cried out in pain, yanking my hand back. The door's surface rippled like water, and a face emerged from its depths, my own face, distorted and wrong. "Why do you want to leave?" my doppelganger asked, its voice a twisted version of my own. "Isn't this what you wanted? True immersion, a world more real than reality?" I stumbled back, my mind reeling. "No," I said, my voice hoarse. "This isn't right. I need to get back to the real world." The face in the door laughed, a sound that sent shivers down my spine. "But how do you know this isn't the real world? How can you be sure that what you remember as reality isn't just another game?" Doubt crept into my mind, insidious and terrifying. How long had I been here? The memories of my life before putting on the headset seemed distant and hazy. What if this twisted place was all there was? I shook my head violently, trying to clear the confusion. "No, you're wrong. This is a malfunction, a glitch. I need to get out." I lunged for the door handle again, ignoring the pain as electricity coursed through me. The face in the door contorted in anger, its features melting and reforming in grotesque patterns. "You can't leave!" it shrieked. "You're part of the system now. Part of me." The ground began to shake, cracks spreading outward from where I stood. I clung to the door handle, gritting my teeth against the pain. The world around me was literally falling apart, chunks of landscape vanishing into a void of swirling code. With a final, desperate effort, I wrenched the door open. Beyond it was not the exit I had hoped for, but a swirling vortex of light and data. Without any other choice, I threw myself into it. I was falling, tumbling through an endless stream of information. Images and sounds from 1,000 different games flashed by, bleeding into one another. I saw fragments of my own memories, distorted and glitching like corrupted files. Just when I thought I would be lost forever in this digital maelstrom, everything went black. I gasped, my eyes flying open. I was back in my room, sprawled on the floor. The VR headset lay next to me, its lights blinking erratically. My entire body ached, as if I had run a marathon, and my head throbbed with the worst migraine I'd ever experienced. Shakily, I got to my feet, my legs threatening to give out beneath me. How long had I been trapped in that virtual nightmare? Hours? Days? I stumbled to my computer, checking the date and time. Only 3 hours had passed since I first put on the headset. I slumped into my chair, relief washing over me. I was out. I was safe. But as the adrenaline faded, a creeping unease took its place. The experience had been too real, too visceral to simply shrug off. My eyes fell on the VR headset, still blinking on the floor. A part of me wanted to smash it, to ensure I could never be trapped like that again. But a smaller, darker part whispered that maybe the other world had been real too. That maybe, just maybe, this reality was the true illusion. I reached for my phone, intending to call NextGen VR and report what had happened. But as I picked it up, the screen flickered, displaying a message that made my blood run cold. Level 2, loading. Prepare for deep immersion. The world around me began to waver and distort. As reality dissolved once more, I realized with horror that my ordeal was far from over. The game, it seemed, had only just begun. The cartridge felt heavy in my hands, its worn label promising an adventure never meant to see the light of day. I should have known better. In the world of gaming, some things are unreleased for a reason. My name's Alex, and I've been collecting video games for as long as I can remember. Retro consoles, limited editions, imports, you name it. I've probably got it squirreled away somewhere in my apartment. but nothing in my collection could compare to what I'd just scored, a prototype cartridge for an unreleased game from the 90s. I'd heard whispers about it on obscure forums and in hushed conversations at gaming conventions. A horror game so intense, so psychologically damaging, that the developers scrapped it before release. Most people thought it was just an urban legend, but I knew better. I'd spent years tracking down leads, following breadcrumbs left by former employees and industry insiders. And now, here it was in my hands. The label was faded and peeling, but I could still make out the title. Echoes of Eternity. No artwork, no flashy logo, just those 3 words in a simple serif font. My hands trembled as I approached my prized CRT TV, hooked up to a pristine retro console. The anticipation was almost unbearable. What secrets would this game reveal? What sights had remained unseen for decades? I slid the cartridge into place and flicked on the power. The screen flickered to life, static dancing across its curved surface before settling into a pitch-black void. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, slowly, text began to appear. "Welcome, player. Are you prepared to face your demons?" A chill ran down my spine. Already this was unlike any game I'd ever played. There was no title screen, no options menu, just this ominous message floating in the darkness. I pressed the start button, and the game began in earnest. The visuals were crude by today's standards, but there was something unsettling about them. The polygons seemed to shift and warp when I wasn't looking directly at them, creating a constant sense of unease. I found myself controlling a character in a decrepit mansion, each room more nightmarish than the last. The sound design was impeccable, with creaks and whispers that seemed to come from inside my own head rather than the TV speakers. As I played, I became aware of small, strange occurrences around me. At first, it was easy to dismiss them as products of an overactive imagination. The room felt colder. Shadows in the corners seemed to deepen and shift. But I was too engrossed in the game to pay much attention. It wasn't until I reached what seemed to be the game's first boss encounter that things took a turn for the truly bizarre. The creature on the screen was a writhing mass of tentacles and eyes, its movements jerky and unnatural. As I struggled to defeat it, I noticed my controller growing warm in my hands. Suddenly, the image on the screen froze. Before I could react, a high-pitched whine emanated from the TV, growing in intensity until I had to cover my ears. The screen flickered rapidly, displaying fragmented images and bursts of static. And then, as abruptly as it had started, it stopped. The game resumed as if nothing had happened, the boss defeated and my character moving on to the next area. I sat back, my heart pounding. What the hell was that? A glitch? Some kind of anti-piracy measure? Whatever it was, it had felt far too real for comfort. I considered turning off the console and walking away. Something about this game felt wrong, dangerous even. But my curiosity got the better of me. I had to see more, had to uncover the secrets that had kept this game hidden for so long. As I delved deeper into the game, the line between the virtual world and reality began to blur. The game seemed to know things it shouldn't. My name, my fears, details about my life that I'd never shared with anyone. Text would appear on screen, addressing me directly, taunting me with cryptic messages. "Are you enjoying yourself, Alex? We've been waiting so long for someone like you." I tried to convince myself it was all part of the game, some advanced AI or clever programming trick, but deep down, I knew that wasn't possible. Not for a game from this era. The room around me continued to change in subtle ways. Items on my shelves would be in different positions when I glanced away from the screen. The posters on my walls seemed to depict more sinister scenes than I remembered, and always there was that feeling of being watched, of unseen eyes boring into the back of my skull. I lost track of time as I played. Hours blended together, punctuated only by increasingly disturbing game sequences and inexplicable real-world phenomena. My phone buzzed with concerned messages from friends I'd blown off, but I couldn't bring myself to look away from the screen. It was during a particularly intense sequence, my character navigating a twisted landscape of flesh and machinery, that I noticed the first physical symptom, A dull ache had begun in my temples, gradually spreading until my entire head throbbed with pain. I rubbed my eyes, trying to clear the fog that seemed to be settling over my mind. When I looked back at the screen, my blood ran cold. The game character was gone. Instead, I saw myself sitting in my apartment staring at the TV. The perspective slowly panned around as if some unseen entity was circling behind me. I spun around, half expecting to see a camera or some other explanation for the impossible image, but there was nothing there. Just my cluttered apartment, looking slightly wrong in ways I couldn't quite pin down. Turning back to the TV, I saw the view had changed again. Now it showed a close-up of my face, eyes wide with fear. Text appeared below the image. "Do you understand now, Alex? This is no game. This is a door, and you've just walked through it." The pain in my head intensified, becoming almost unbearable. I dropped the controller, clutching at my temples. The room around me seemed to pulse and warp, the walls breathing like living things. I stumbled to my feet, desperate to escape, to shut off the game and end this nightmare. But as I reached for the console, a jolt of electricity arced from the machine to my hand. I yanked it back with a cry of pain, watching in horror as the electricity continued to dance across the surface of the console and TV. The game was changing now, the crude polygons giving way to hyper-realistic graphics that seemed to leap off the screen. The boundary between the virtual and the real was dissolving before my eyes. Creatures began to emerge from the TV-twisted, impossible things that should not exist in our reality. They crawled and slithered across my floor, their touch leaving scorch marks on the carpet. I backed away, my mind reeling. This couldn't be happening. It had to be a hallucination, a vivid nightmare brought on by too many hours of gaming, but the pain was too real, the fear too visceral to be a dream. As the entities advanced, I made a desperate lunge for the cartridge, intending to rip it from the console. My fingers closed around it, and for a moment, I felt a surge of hope. Then the cartridge began to burn, growing hotter and hotter until I could smell my own flesh cooking. I couldn't let go. Some force was keeping my hand locked around the searing plastic. The creatures were all around me now, their forms shifting and changing in ways that hurt to look at. From the TV, I heard a voice. My voice, but twisted and wrong. "Thank you for playing, Alex. Your participation has opened the way. They've been waiting so long." The last thing I saw before losing consciousness was my own face on the screen, smiling with inhuman malice as the room dissolved into chaos around me. I woke up in a hospital bed 3 days later, my right hand bandaged and my mind fragmented. The doctors spoke of an electrical fire in my apartment, of smoke inhalation and burns. They found me unconscious on the floor, the remains of my gaming setup a melted ruin around me. I tried to tell them what really happened, but the words wouldn't come. How could I explain the inexplicable? Who would believe me? As I recovered, I scoured the internet for any information about echoes of eternity, desperate for some confirmation that what I experienced was real. But there was nothing. No record of the game, no mention of the developers I thought I remembered. Sometimes late at night, I swear I can hear the faint sound of static coming from unplugged electronics. Shadows move in ways they shouldn't, and I feel eyes watching me from empty corners. And always, always, there's a voice in the back of my mind whispering, "Ready for the next level?" The red light on my webcam blinked silently in the darkness, a digital eye that never slept. I hadn't turned it on. I never did anymore. But there it was, watching, always watching. It started innocently enough. I'm Sarah, a 23-year-old marketing assistant by day and a casual gamer by night. Nothing serious, just a way to unwind after long hours at the office. A few rounds of my favorite battle royale game, some laughs with online friends, then off to bed. Simple, harmless fun. Or so I thought. The first time I noticed something odd was during a particularly intense match. I was down to the final 3 players, my heart racing as I crouched behind a crumbling wall, listening for footsteps. That's when I saw it. A quick flicker on my second monitor, the one I used to keep an eye on my webcam feed while streaming. For a split second, the image distorted, pixelating into an unrecognizable mess before snapping back to normal. I blinked, chalking it up to an overheating graphics card or a glitch in my streaming software. The game demanded my attention, and I pushed the incident from my mind. I should have paid more attention. Over the next few weeks, the glitches became more frequent, more noticeable. Sometimes it was just a brief flicker. Other times the image would freeze or display strange artifacts. I ran virus scans, updated drivers, even called my internet provider. Nothing seemed to fix it. Then came the night that changed everything. I was in the middle of a late-night gaming session, my room illuminated only by the glow of my monitors. The chat was lively, viewers engaging with each other and cheering me on as I navigated a particularly challenging level. Suddenly, my webcam feed went dark. I frowned, tapping at the camera mounted on top of my monitor. "Sorry, guys. Looks like my cam's acting up again," I said, trying to keep the frustration out of my voice. This was becoming a regular occurrence, and I was starting to worry about losing viewers. As I reached up to unplug the camera, intending to restart it, something caught my eye. A message in the chat, from a username I didn't recognize. "Dark Observer, don't touch it. I like watching you." A chill ran down my spine. I told myself it was just a troll, someone trying to get a rise out of me. But something about the message felt off. I laughed nervously, trying to play it cool for my audience. "Very funny, guys. Let's focus on the game, shall we?" I did my best to ignore the incident, to lose myself in the game. But I couldn't shake the feeling of unease that had settled over me. My eyes kept darting to the chat, watching for any more messages from Dark Observer. There were none. As the night wore on, fatigue began to set in. I said my goodbyes to the chat, promising to be back the next evening. As I reached to end the stream, my webcam suddenly flickered back to life. But the image it showed wasn't my room. For a brief moment, I saw another space, a dimly lit room filled with monitors, each displaying a different webcam feed. And in the center of it all, a figure shrouded in shadow, turning to look directly at the camera, directly at me. I slammed my laptop shut, my heart pounding. What the hell was that? A prank? Some kind of bizarre technical glitch? I tried to rationalize it, to come up with any explanation other than the terrifying possibility forming in my mind. Sleep eluded me that night. I tossed and turned, my mind replaying the image of that shadowy room over and over. By the time morning came, I had almost convinced myself it was just a product of an overtired imagination. Almost. The next few days passed in a haze of paranoia. I covered my webcam with tape, only removing it when I absolutely had to stream. I changed all my passwords, enabled two-factor authentication on every account. I even considered calling the police, but what would I tell them? That I saw a creepy room on my webcam? They'd laugh me out of the station. It was during my Friday night stream that things escalated. I was halfway through my usual gaming session, the tape reluctantly removed from my camera to appease my viewers. The chat was scrolling by as usual, a mix of game-related comments and friendly banter. Then, cutting through the noise, another message from Dark Observer. "Dark Observer. You can't hide from me, Sarah. I see you even when your camera is off." My blood ran cold. How did they know my real name? I had never mentioned it on stream, always going by my gaming handle. With trembling fingers, I typed out a response. "Me. Who are you? What do you want?" The reply came almost instantly. "Dark Observer. I want to play a game. Your game." Before I could respond, my screen went black. Panic gripped me as I frantically tried to reboot my system. When the screen finally flickered back to life, what I saw made my heart stop. It was my room, but not from the angle of my webcam. This was a view from the corner looking down at my desk. At me. A message appeared on the screen. "I'm in your home network now, Sarah. Every camera, every microphone, they're all mine. Shall we play I leaped from my chair, spinning around to scan the room. There were no cameras in that corner, no possible way for anyone to be seeing me from that angle. Unless my smart TV. The digital photo frame my mom had given me last Christmas. Even the supposedly disconnected webcam on my laptop. All potential eyes for whoever was behind this. I wanted to scream, to run, to smash every piece of electronics in my apartment. But a part of me knew it was already too late. Whoever this was, whatever they wanted, they were already in. With shaking hands, I turned back to my computer. The chat was going wild, viewers wondering what was happening, why I had suddenly gone pale and silent. I forced myself to take a deep breath, to plaster on a fake smile. Sorry about that, guys. Just some technical difficulties. Why don't we call it a night? I'm not feeling too well. I ended the stream as quickly as I could, ignoring the concerned messages flooding the chat. As soon as I was offline, I unplugged every device in my apartment, plunging the space into darkness. But it wasn't enough. My phone, sitting on the bedside table, lit up with a message. "Tisk tisk, Sarah. That's not very sporting of you. Don't you want to play?" I threw the phone across the room, hearing it shatter against the wall. Tears of frustration and fear streamed down my face as I sank to the floor, hugging my knees to my chest. What did they want from me? How long had they been watching? And more importantly, how could I make it stop? The next few days were a blur of paranoia and sleepless nights. I called in sick to work, unable to bear the thought of leaving my apartment. I spent hours scouring online forums, looking for anyone who might have experienced something similar. Most of what I found was dismissed as creepypasta or urban legends, but a few accounts chilled me to the bone with their similarity to my situation. I considered going to the police, but what evidence did I have? A few cryptic messages and a paranoid story about hacked webcams? They'd never take me seriously. It was on the third day that I received an email from an address I didn't recognize. The subject line made my heart race. "Ready to take your streaming to the next level?" With trembling fingers, I opened the message. "Sarah, I hope you've enjoyed our little game so far. You've proven to be a most entertaining subject. But now it's time to raise the stakes. Tomorrow night, 9 p.m., go live. Give your viewers the show of a lifetime. If you don't, well, I have quite a collection of footage that your friends, family, and employers might find interesting. The choice is yours. But remember, I'll be watching. Your biggest fan, Dark Observer." My mind reeled. What kind of a show did they expect me to put on? And what footage could they possibly have that would be so damaging? As the designated time approached the following evening, I found myself sitting at my desk, every electronic device in my apartment arranged before me like some twisted altar. My hands shook as I booted up my streaming software, the familiar interface now feeling alien and threatening. The red light on my webcam blinked to life, a sinister wink in the dim light of my room. I took a deep breath, trying to still the trembling in my voice as I began. "Hey everyone, thanks for joining me tonight. I have something important to share with you all." The chat immediately filled with concerned messages. They could tell something was wrong. I closed my eyes, steeling myself for what I was about to do. "For the past few weeks, I've been targeted by someone who's been watching me, threatening me, and tonight, they want me to put on a show." I paused, scanning the chat. Confusion, disbelief, and worry flooded the screen. And then, cutting through it all, a single message. "Dark Observer. Excellent introduction, Sarah. Now, let's begin the real performance." My screen flickered, and suddenly I was no longer in control. Windows began opening, displaying private photos, personal emails, footage from cameras I never knew existed in my home. My most intimate moments, my deepest secrets, all laid bare for my viewers to see. I watched in horror as my life was dissected and displayed, powerless to stop it. The chat exploded with a mix of shock, disgust, and morbid fascination. Some viewers left, others called for the stream to be reported, but many stayed, unable to tear themselves away from the digital train wreck unfolding before them. As the torrent of private information slowed, a final message appeared on my screen. "Thank you for playing, Sarah. The game is over. But remember, I'm always watching. Always." The stream cut off abruptly, plunging my room into silence. I sat there, numb, staring at the now dark screen. In the span of an hour, my life had been laid bare, my privacy shattered, my sense of security destroyed. The webcam's red light continued to blink, a reminder that in our hyper-connected world, we're never truly alone. I reached out slowly, my fingers hovering over the power button of my computer. One press and I could shut it all down, disconnect, try to reclaim some semblance of privacy. But as I steeled myself to do it, a chilling thought stopped me cold. In a world where every device can be an eye or an ear for someone else, is there really any escape? The red light blinked on, watching, waiting. And somewhere out there, I knew, Dark Observer was already planning the next game. The creature's tentacles writhed mere inches from my face, its razor-sharp teeth gnashing hungrily. I stumbled backward, my heart pounding, only to remember, this wasn't real. It couldn't be real. I just needed to take off the headset and everything would be fine. But as my trembling hands reached up, I realized with dawning horror there was no headset to remove. My name is Jack, and I used to think I was on the cutting edge of gaming technology. Now I'm not sure where reality ends and the game begins. It all started when I signed up to be an early tester for Next Reality's new augmented reality gaming headset. As a tech journalist specializing in gaming, I'd had my fair share of experiences with VR and AR. But Next Reality promised something different, a truly immersive experience that would blend the digital and physical worlds seamlessly. The day the sleek black box arrived at my apartment, I could barely contain my excitement. Inside was a device that looked more like a pair of high-tech sunglasses than the bulky headsets I was used to. A note included in the package read, "Welcome to the future of gaming. The world is your playground." I spent the next hour setting up the device, downloading the companion app, and calibrating it to my surroundings. The process was surprisingly simple, with the headset scanning my apartment and creating a detailed 3D map for the game to interact with. Finally, it was time to dive in. I slipped on the headset, which was so light I could barely feel it, and booted up the first game, an urban fantasy RPG that promised to turn my city into a magical battleground. The moment the game started, I was awestruck. My living room transformed before my eyes, ancient runes etching themselves onto the walls, mystical plants sprouting from the cracks in my floorboards. When I looked out the window, I saw dragons circling distant skyscrapers and ethereal spirits drifting down the street. The level of detail was incredible. I could interact with the magical elements as if they were really there, feeling resistance when I touched a spectral barrier, sensing the heat from a conjured fireball hovering above my palm. The game used the real world as its foundation, seamlessly integrating fantastic elements that felt like they truly belonged. I spent hours exploring this new reality, completing quests that had me searching my neighborhood for hidden magical artifacts and battling otherworldly creatures that burst through portals in the middle of the street. It was exhilarating, unlike anything I'd ever experienced in gaming before. As night fell and exhaustion began to set in, I decided it was time to call it quits. I reached up to remove the headset, ready to return to the mundane reality of my apartment. That's when I discovered the first problem. My hands met nothing but air where the headset should have been. I felt my face, my hair, my ears, nothing. The device seemed to have vanished. "Okay, don't panic," I muttered to myself. "It's probably just really well integrated. There has to be a way to exit the game." I tried voice commands, specific gestures, even closing my eyes and willing the game to end. Nothing worked. The magical world remained stubbornly present, overlaid on my familiar surroundings. As the minutes ticked by and my attempts grew more desperate, I noticed something unsettling. The game world was becoming more vivid, more solid. The boundaries between what I knew to be real and what was part of the game were starting to blur. I stumbled to my computer, hoping to find some information online about how to force quit the game. But when I looked at the screen, the text swam before my eyes, transforming into arcane symbols I couldn't comprehend. A chill ran down my spine as I realized the implications. The game wasn't just adding to my reality anymore. It was altering my perception of the real world. Sleep eluded me that night. Every time I closed my eyes, visions of mythical beasts and eldritch horrors danced behind my eyelids. I tossed and turned, hoping that somehow, when morning came, this would all prove to be some vivid dream. But dawn brought no relief. If anything, the merger of game and reality had progressed further. My bedroom wall now sported a glistening portal, pulsing with otherworldly energy. The hardwood floor had given way to a carpet of softly glowing moss. Even the air felt different, heavy with the scent of ozone and magic. I stumbled to the bathroom, splashing water on my face in a futile attempt to shock myself back to normalcy. As I looked in the mirror, I recoiled in horror. My reflection showed me transformed, my eyes glowing with an inner fire, faint runic patterns tracing themselves across my skin. "This isn't real," I said aloud, my voice shaking. "It's just the game. It has to be the game." But even as I said it, doubt gnawed at me. If this was just a game, how could I feel the cool tile under my feet, the water droplets on my face? How could I smell the musty odor of the moss creeping up my walls, or hear the distant roar of what sounded unsettlingly like a dragon? I spent the next few hours in a daze, pacing my apartment, trying anything I could think of to end this nightmare. I tried contacting Next Reality's customer support, but my phone only showed an error message in that same indecipherable runic script. As the day wore on, I noticed my thoughts becoming increasingly jumbled. Memories of my life before the game began to feel hazy and distant, while knowledge of arcane lore and magical theory surfaced in my mind unbidden. It was late afternoon when the first quest notification pinged into existence before my eyes. A glowing exclamation mark hovered in the air, accompanied by text. "Dark forces gather. The city needs a hero. Will you answer the call?" My heart raced. Part of me screamed that this wasn't real, that I needed to find a way out. But another part, a part that felt like it was growing stronger by the minute, thrilled at the chance for adventure. Before I could decide how to respond, a deafening roar shook the building. I rushed to the window to see a massive scaled creature landing in the street outside, crushing cars beneath its clawed feet. People, real people, my neighbors, ran screaming from the beast. In that moment, the line between game and reality, already blurred, seemed to disappear entirely. Whether this was real or not no longer mattered. People were in danger, and somehow I had the power to help. I felt knowledge flowing through me, understanding of spells and combat techniques I'd never learned. My hand raised almost of its own accord, crackling with arcane energy. As I rushed out to face the dragon, a small voice in the back of my mind whispered a terrifying question. If this was the game, how far did it go? Was anything I remembered as real actually real, or had my entire life been part of this virtual world? The next few hours passed in a blur of frantic combat, daring rescues and pulse-pounding chases across a cityscape that grew more fantastical by the minute. I hurled fireballs at demonic entities, wove protective wards around cowering civilians, and soared between skyscrapers on conjured winds. Through it all, that nagging doubt remained. With each spell cast, each impossible feat accomplished, the life I thought I knew felt more and more distant. The persona of Jack the tech journalist was fading, replaced by Jack the battle mage, defender of the city. As night fell once more, I found myself atop a high tower, gazing out over a metropolis transformed. Dragons wheeled through the sky, magical duels lit up the streets, and rifts to other dimensions tore open the very fabric of reality. I closed my eyes, trying one last time to will myself back to the mundane world I'd known just 2 days ago. But when I opened them, nothing had changed. The fantastical scene before me remained, more vivid and real than anything I'd ever experienced. A notification pinged, drawing my attention to a new quest marker glowing in the distance. Whatever this reality was, wherever the lines between game and life truly lay, I no longer had a choice. This was my world now, for better or worse. As I leapt from the tower, arcane energies swirling around me to carry me towards my next adventure, one thought echoed through my mind. In a world where reality itself could be rewritten by lines of code and the whims of unseen programmers, what did it even mean to be real anymore? The city needed its hero, and real or not, I had a role to play. With a final glance at the impossibly beautiful and terrifying world around me, I soared off into the night, leaving behind the last vestiges of the life I once knew. The game, it seemed, had only just begun.